I have always considered myself a good wife. But one day I made a choice that changed everything. This is a story of passion, betrayal, and the brutal reality of the consequences. And, believe me, you are not ready for what happens next. Stay until the end. The ending will shock you. My name is Olivia, and I've always believed that loyalty is something only those who truly appreciate it deserve. My husband, Nick, was perfect in every way, wealthy, caring, even overly righteous. We had been together for 5 years, and everyone around us thought we were the ideal couple. But do you know what the problem was? Perfection is always boring. I loved Nick, but his predictability, his routines, his stability, it was killing my passion for life. And that's why I allowed myself to cross the line. At first, it was just harmless flirting, but then things went much further. It happened a year ago. I had always believed that life could be more than just work, household chores, and a husband. And then he appeared. Eric. Tall, with piercing green eyes that looked at me as if they could see right through me. We met at a conference where I was accompanying Nick. The irony? Nick was the one who introduced us. Olivia, this is Eric, an old acquaintance of mine. He works in real estate. I reached out to shake his hand, and the moment our palms touched, a shiver ran down my spine. He held my hand just a second too long. There was no formality in his gaze. There was something else. Something dangerous. After that encounter, I couldn't get him out of my head. I was satisfied with my marriage, but I craved excitement. I craved risk. I wanted to see how far I could go. 2 weeks after the conference, I received a message from him. If it weren't for your husband, I'd ask you to dinner. My heart started pounding faster. I shouldn't have responded. I shouldn't have even considered it. But what did I do? What if my husband didn't know? I sent back, my fingers trembling with anticipation. That was the moment everything changed. Because Eric wasn't the kind of man to play small games. His reply came almost immediately. Then I'd show you what real passion feels like. And you know what? I wanted to find out. I had always considered myself a strong woman, someone who controlled every situation. But Eric, he was different. His confidence, his directness, the way his eyes lingered on me, making my breath hitch. I knew I was playing with fire, but didn't that make the game even more thrilling? The day after his message, I couldn't focus on anything. My phone lay on the table, and my fingers unconsciously traced the screen. He was waiting for my answer. Nick noticed my distraction at breakfast. "Everything okay, love?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," I replied with a smile. A lot on my mind? More like one single, dangerous thought. And it wouldn't leave me alone. By evening, I made my decision. "Are you sure you want to play this game?" I texted Eric. His reply came instantly. "I never play games, Olivia. I always get what I want." This wasn't just flirting. It was a challenge, a test. And I accepted it. We met in a small bar on the other side of the city. Somewhere no one knew us. I deliberately chose a dress that made me feel different, shorter, bolder than what I usually wore. I walked in and saw him. Eric was already sitting at a table, and the moment his eyes landed on me, they stayed there. I felt my body tense. He wasn't just looking. He was studying me. I approached, and he gestured for me to sit. "You look stunning," he said simply. "I know," I smiled. He laughed. "I love women who understand that about themselves." We talked. About everything and nothing. But the words didn't matter. What mattered was how he looked at me. How his fingers lightly brushed against my hand. How the tension between us grew with every passing minute. When he leaned in closer, I held my breath. "Do you know what you're doing?" His voice was low, almost husky. "Do you?" I met his gaze without fear. His hand slid along my neck, a featherlight touch that sent shivers through me. I always know what I want. My heart pounded. I could have said no. I could have stood up and walked away. But instead, I did the only thing I truly wanted in that moment. I pulled him closer and let myself dive into the forbidden world I had only ever dreamed of before. Eric didn't text me for 3 days. I waited with the same impatient excitement a teenager feels, checking their phone for a message from their first love. And then, finally, "Do you regret it?" I held my breath, staring at the screen. And I replied with one word: "No." The next night, I was in his arms again. This time it was different. There were no more games of, "Should we be doing this?" We already knew the answer. I felt the raw hunger in him as he ripped my dress off before we even reached the bed. His lips left trails of fire on my skin. His hands explored every inch of me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was freedom. I mastered the art of living a double life. A wife at home, a lover at night. With Nick, I was gentle, obedient, devoted. With Eric, I was wild, reckless, uncontrollable. But every lie has its limits. And I knew that sooner or later, that line would disappear. I just didn't know how soon it would happen. I realized things were spiraling out of control when Eric started demanding more. "Don't you think we deserve more than just hotel rooms?" he asked, lying beside me after another night together. I turned away, staring into the darkness outside the window. "We don't have another choice." "We do." He propped himself up on his elbow. "Leave him." His words sent an electric shock through my body. I opened my mouth to respond, but he didn't let me. "You can't deny that this is more than just a physical connection." I stayed silent. Of course, it was more. Of course, I had lost control. But I couldn't imagine my life without Nick. His stability, his care, his predictability. It annoyed me, but at the same time, I needed it. But was it love? The next morning, I woke up with the overwhelming feeling that I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I lay in my bed next to Nick. His steady breathing filled the quiet room, and yet, I couldn't stop thinking about another body, another set of hands, another pair of lips. About Eric. His touch still burned on my skin. His whispers still echoed in my ears. I should have felt guilty. But all I felt was euphoria. "You seem distracted today," Nick said over breakfast. I flinched. "Just a lot on my mind at work," I smiled, taking a sip of coffee. He believed me. Of course he did. I was the perfect wife. A woman who had no reason to lie. But the truth was, I wanted to feel that again. I wanted to drown in it deeper. I started feeling restless. At home, Nick noticed the change. "You haven't been yourself lately," he said over dinner, watching me carefully. I folded my hands in my lap, forcing myself to stay calm. "Just tired? Or hiding some things?" His voice was steady, but suspicion flickered in his eyes. I laughed. "You know me, Nick. I never hide anything." He smiled, but I knew he didn't believe me. Men aren't as blind as we think. One evening, he confronted me directly. "Is there someone else?" I nearly spilled my wine. "What?" "You've changed, Olivia." I feel it. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "It's all in your head." He nodded, but I knew he wouldn't let this go. I understood one thing. Either I put an end to this now, or my lies would crumble like a house of cards. But did I want to stop? Could I even stop? For the next few days, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. But inside, fear consumed me. I knew Nick wouldn't let this go. He was smart, observant, and dangerous when things didn't go as expected. But worse than that, I felt Eric was losing patience. "I don't want to hide anymore, Olivia." His voice was sharp as we met in his car after work. "Either you make a choice, or I'll make it for you. I didn't know how to respond. Did I want him? Yes. Was I ready to destroy everything? I wasn't sure. But as it turned out, the choice had already been made for me. I came home and found Nick in our bedroom, holding my phone in his hands. I froze in the doorway. What are you doing? My voice came out sharper than I intended. He lifted his head. His face was completely expressionless. Is it true? He asked quietly. I didn't have to ask what he meant. On the screen was my open conversation with Eric. Every reckless text, every passionate message, every detail I had tried so hard to hide. Cold sweat covered my body. Nick, How long? He interrupted. A few months. And you weren't even going to tell me, were you? His eyes were filled with anger, but not the kind that explodes. The kind that simmers. The kind that destroys. He slowly stood up, tossing my phone onto the bed. I thought we were a team, Olivia. I thought so too. No, you only thought about yourself. His voice was quiet, but laced with betrayal, pain, and hatred. I wanted to say something, but what was there to say? That I was sorry? That it was a mistake? I knew he would never forgive me. I knew my perfect life had shattered into pieces. And yet, I couldn't even cry, because deep down, a part of me still wanted Eric. And that terrified me more than anything. Nick was silent. I was silent. A suffocating tension hung between us. Why, Olivia, he finally spoke. Why did you do this to me? I didn't know what to say. Because I wanted excitement? Because I felt forgotten? Because I loved feeling desired? None of those answers could ease his pain. I started, but he lifted a hand, cutting me off. You destroyed us. His voice was calm, but in his eyes, I saw something new, something cold. You do realize everything has changed now, right? Nick continued. I nodded. I expected anger, screaming, cursing, but he just looked at me and said, I want a divorce. Those words hit harder than I expected. Yes, I knew this was the logical outcome, but was I ready for it? I didn't want to be alone. I wasn't ready to lose stability. Nick, don't. Just pack your things. His voice was cold, almost indifferent. I wanted to argue, to beg, to convince him, but I knew it was pointless. I left the house with a single suitcase and an overwhelming sense of emptiness. My first instinct was to go to Eric. He was the only person I had left. I called him. No answer. I tried again, and again. Finally, he declined the call and sent a text. I didn't think you'd actually leave him. This was fun, but let's not make it dramatic. My heart stopped. What? I read the message again, unable to believe my eyes. And then, I understood. Eric never really wanted me. I was just entertainment for him. And now, with my stability shattered, I was no longer fun. I stood on the street, suitcase in hand, realizing I had lost everything. My husband, my lover, my home, all because of my own stupidity. Panic crept in. What now? Where do I go? What do I do? I wanted freedom, but I never thought it would feel this cold. I sat on a bench in the park, clutching my phone. No home, no husband, no lover, just silence around me and the cruel reality of my choices. I replayed every conversation, every touch, every kiss that had led me here. I betrayed. I risked everything. I lost. Olivia? I lifted my head. Standing in front of me was a man I hadn't seen in years. James. My ex-boyfriend. My first love. What are you doing here? He asked, sitting beside me, his curious eyes scanning my exhausted face. I gave a bitter smile, just trying to figure out how to fix my life, He tilted his head slightly. Judging by the way you look, seems like life already decided to change for you. I sighed. You know, he started after a pause. I once really regretted losing you. I looked at him, surprised. Seriously?
Yeah.
But now, looking at you, I realize maybe it was for the best. His words stung more than I expected. I wanted to argue, to prove that I wasn't just a broken woman who made a mistake. But was that even true? So, what are you going to do next? He asked, leaning back against the bench. I thought for a moment. I could try to get Nick back. But would he ever forgive me? I could try to find Eric. But did I really want to be just a game to him again? Or I could start over. No men. No lies. No fake happiness. I took a deep breath and smiled. I don't know, James. But this time, I won't make the same mistakes. He smiled back. Now that sounds interesting. I rented an apartment. I found a job. I started rebuilding my life from scratch. Was it easy?
No.
But for the first time in a long time, I felt honest with myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was my greatest victory.
Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.